This is Bleav In Buckeyes. I'm Bryant with All-American quarterback Chimdi Chekwa. We got a great show for you guys. I'm excited. I'm feeling good. We kind of made it through the summer, man. We got football this week, Chill, man. What's up, man? What's going on? You fired up? Get hyped. Let's go.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for football, man. It's finally here. Camp is starting in just a couple days. The guys look good, man. I'm excited for this time of year. It's finally here, so I'm pumped up. How about you?
Yeah, man. Fired up, man. Ready to go. We have to get football, an actual game this week. We got the Hall of Fame game this week. I think it's the Chargers and the Lions are playing at the Hall of Fame, and I always tune into that because that's like, that's the first real football you're going to see of the season of the summer. Our guys are heading to camp on Thursday the 31st as well. And man, it's just exciting times, man. This is what we've been waiting for. We've been talking a long time about stuff that kind of, sort of, maybe a little bit matter. But now it's time to get to the meat and potatoes and build us a team for the 25 season.
Yeah, and it gets started quick, right? Week 1, it's a big game. So every practice and camp is truly important. I remember when we played, you was going to come out of camp and have a kind of a warm-up game at Youngstown State. Shout out to Youngstown State, but
right, shout out.
We typically had one of those in-state games against what you would deem a lesser opponent. That's not the case this year, right? So, you go through camp, you want to go hard, you want to get prepared, you want to stay healthy, right? Like, it's not a ton of time to rehab an injury and whatnot. And depending on what position that injury could potentially happen at, it may not be a ton of depth when you talk about, some spots where there's maybe some younger guys who haven't had a lot of experience. So their first experience is going to be against a big team, big time game, big time matchup. Big noon kickoff matchup.
So. Yeah. No, but I mean, that's a good point, though. Like you say, everything really matters, right? Because, like you said, we play in some of those, let's say, those in-state games, first game. And it, man, you just never know what you got, right? You're right. You might have a guy that's a starter coming back that's kind of, need to get his feet under him. You got young guys who never did it, right? They never played in the shoe, let alone against, a good opponent. Things get a little choppy, right? Sometimes you just don't know. Even in practice, if you have a long drive or a lot of plays in a row, it's usually like 4 or 5 plays. Like, you know what I mean? So you get into a game, you're in a situation, you have a 10-play drive, you're just literally not used to executing that many times of getting in the huddle, out of the huddle, knowing you need to do, come on off the ball and try to execute a play. So, yeah, man, it's like you say, practice would be important. We know they're going to mix in some scrimmage type of situations to kind of figure out depth and things of that nature. Those become even more important because, once again, like you say, we got the Texas Longhorns. They're on the way.
And, you look at it, obviously Texas is they're going through the same thing, right? They're going to have some guys getting some of their first starts, et cetera, and they're going to be on the road. That's one thing that's different for them. They got to travel into a hostile environment. But both teams went on deep playoff runs. Both teams had a lot of young guys who came along through those playoffs and got to see big-time matchups, big-time games. You got to be a part of that experience. So it's a little bit different than when we play in terms of just being in those prime time type games over and over and over again, and then playing the same team that you played in the playoffs. So.
If you would, yeah, and like you say, it's college, so the teams will look different, right? We know Texas will be led by their. I mean, I hate to say they got feeling pressure because I don't know him, but I mean, there's a lot of talk around Manning coming in, and this now being his team, and some of the pressure that some of the media has put on, like, oh, he should have been the guy last year. He's the known number 1 pick in the draft. Why they was wasting time playing, all that kind of stuff, like, right? So now he's kind of feeling that pressure. He has to be like, if he's not the favorite for the Heisman, he's definitely in the top 3 if we're looking at stuff like that. And he has to come on the road and kind of show it. Because, it's college football. One bad week, it's kind of, things change a lot. And then obviously Ohio State, we're still in the middle of a quarterback race, right? We still haven't, we don't really know who to start. I think after spring, I think we all could agree that, saying it's probably leading the bunch a little bit there, just kind of, hearing how the guys speak about him in his play. But Lincoln can't be far behind because they talk about all his things that he brings to the table, him being a workout warrior, him being growing and emerging as a leader. All that stuff had to be played out here over the next few weeks as we start looking at this 25 team.
Yeah, I'm interested in your perspective and this QB competition. I mean, how competition how much of a competition do you think it is at this stage? I'll just say this: if I'm the coach going into training camp, certain positions in certain areas where I want to be mostly set at, not 100%. Right? I want to be 75% of the way there. Quarterback is one of them, especially when you're going to go in to a first week matchup versus a playoff level team, right? Even if it doesn't stay, even if I don't keep that quarterback after 3 games, I at least for this first ramp up want to kind of know who's in lead position. And it's the same way really across the roster for the most part. I want to have a safety though. I want to have a couple corners who I know are legit. Maybe there's a few backups or maybe that second position you're competing for, but I want to have some stability somewhere. I'm curious your thoughts on the QB competition as it currently stands.
Yeah, so like I said, I feel like it has to be, and it don't have to be, but in my head is Julian Saint's job to lose, right? I think if he goes out and he kind of keeps on that trajectory of being that leader in and out of huddle, making solid decisions with the football, spreading around. Obviously, we know we're going to a new offensive coordinator under Hartline as well, but just going out there and giving his guys all the weapons, all the 5 stars that we know that we have across the board on the offensive side, giving those guys an actual chance to make plays. If he goes out there and he shows that he has that ability, I think he would go ahead and get that nod. And I hate to bring other factors to it, but it's always a part of it, right? Him being the number 1 quarterback of his class, him being a transfer from Alabama up to Ohio State once Saban decides to retire. That stuff, and Lincoln, when he came in as a 4-star, but he kind of was like a sneaky signing almost. Kind of signed late into the class and things of that nature. It just feels like it's kind of like in Saint's favor to kind of go out there, and if he shows that he could do it, he doesn't leave the door open. I think they would go ahead and go in direction. And then, like you say, once we get into the season, we play Texas. We play a couple games. If Saint's not doing the job, of course you have Lincoln go out there to see what he could bring to the table. God forbid, but let's say we lose, to the Texas game or something of the sort, and and he doesn't play well. Maybe you start to put in Lincoln to see what he brings to the table as well. But I don't know. I just that's my nuts feeling that it'll be kind of Saint's job to go out there, and basically see if he could do it and show that he could do it, because that's what's the point of camp, showing that you could do it, execute on a daily basis, and then I think he'll get that nod to move forward from there.
Yeah, I think so too, and I honestly think while that's important for those guys, Lincoln and Saint, they just got to get ready to play. Like they got to be prepared to play week 1, even if you end up being the number 2 guy. You got to be ready to play week 1 because anything can happen, right? And if you're in the 2 deep in any position, the likelihood that you play, right? That's what it is. So you got to be ready to go at the quarterback position. And even more so in today's game, given that today's game feels like the NFL, where when you get your opportunity, you got to put something on film that looks good because you can end up transferring and you could be the lead guy somewhere else, right? So if Lincoln does end up being that number 2 guy, or if that's the way it's even trending early, I think, his approach just stays the same. I need to go there and carry myself as a starter because at any point in time this season, I can end up being a starter. And if I decide to go elsewhere postseason, I don't even want to go that far into it, right? But even if that was the case, if any of the quarterbacks decide to go elsewhere postseason, they wanted to have, every time they had an opportunity, look like a starting quarterback. Because if you can start at Ohio State, there's a lot of other schools that you can start at. So I look forward to that in camp, right? That QB competition, how they emerge. Tavion St. Clair as well. He looked really good in the spring. He started off a little bit slow, which you would expect for a guy who got his first passes in the shoe. But then he looked very, very impressive. I was honestly surprised at how good he looks, considering that spring football for him was literally still his senior year of high school.
Yeah, right.
So he's actually, I mean, while we're talking about these guys, he's actually competing to be in that 2D. Like, I want the coaches to trust me to be put on the field in those situations. Obviously, he's going to be learning a lot of going into his first camp. But, man, he looked impressive. So from that, what are the positions or some of the guys that, you like to see emerge or you're looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is obviously the defensive line, right? I mean, Coach Day kind of addressed it once spring ended, like, hey, we need to see more out of these guys. And we hit the portal, right? We brought in Bo Atkinson out of North Carolina, who's a starter. He's a guy with some stats. He had a good amount of playing experiences there. So, this is his first time putting on the scarlet and gray. This is his first time going out there against the team, and we get to see him in cap and see what he could bring to the table. Obviously, we had KJ, we had Caden Curry returning. We seen them play a lot of ball for us and good players. Like, I'm kind of,
really good players,
glad that they're a part here, right? But we need more. We need more depth, especially when you talk about that first game. And we know how Texas likes to bring in their defensive line. That's that's the way they play the game. We want to be able to, we just can't depend on four guys to kind of go out there and play every snap. It's just, I don't know. But many teams don't do it. We've seen some teams try to do it. The Iowas of the world, they can kind of do that and get away with it. But most teams don't go approach it that way. So I'm excited to see Bo kind of come in, see what he brings to the table, see if he can kind of bring some of that pass rush that he's known for and kind of get some wins on the edge. Obviously, I'm also line guy. I want to see his block him, but I want to see that fire, that spunk that hopefully he brings with that experience out of North Carolina and coming to the table. How about you? Are you got any players or positions? What you got?
Well, real quick, you mentioned Kenyatta Jackson Jr. and I remember it might have been a couple years ago now because I don't even think it was last year. Just watching him in one-on-ones. I like to watch one-on-ones. I always like to see. Yep. I always like to see how long is it going to take for the quarterback to have to let go of the ball. Right?
Yeah, they good. They good for the soul, man. Right. Yeah.
But man, he looked a couple years ago. I remember watching him one-on-ones, thinking like, man, he looks impressive. He looks good. And then watching him at practice, he looked like he was very active. And he had, he played well, but I feel like I didn't get the same feeling from him that I did when I watched practice, just spring practice or whatever, or even in camp. So, I think, continue to develop, continue to grow, getting more consistent reps, being that he's a lead guy. I think you see him playing even more free. And I think it was Sonny Styles, maybe Caleb Downs, and even Jeremiah Smith mentioned that he was a guy to watch for as a guy who looks explosive, looks like a guy who can lead that group. Caden Curry has been playing good ball for years, so it's good to see guys that I feel like have been waiting for a long time. I feel like they've been waiting forever to finally be able to step into those roles. The defensive tackles, Caden McDonald, we've seen him destroy offensive linemen on short yardage situations. So you want to see that goal line situation.
Hero.
So I look forward to seeing that. But Edric Houston is the new one, right? Bumping inside, he's going to be a D tackle. Seeing his development and seeing how he steps into that role, it's going to be huge. And I keep going back to Texas, and we're going to do some go back and rewatch that playoff game Thursday. We're going to go live and just kind of look at how that game went. Because both teams are watching that game. They're going to watch it maybe 10, 11, 12 times before they play, right? But one thing in that game for both defenses, both Texas and Ohio State, it seemed like they really leaned on four-man pass rush, four-man to stop the run, like the up four. Like they didn't send a lot of blitzes. There wasn't a ton of exotic blitzes. They just did a little bit here and there. But they played coverage for the most part. And to do that, you got to have some dogs up front, especially in the middle of that defensive line. I don't know that they do that this year. If they have the same approach, considering that you got a guy coming into maybe his first start, but you want to be able in this type of game to be able to keep everything in front of you, not have to send a bunch of extra rushers. So I'm interested to see how that defensive tackle position plays out.
Yeah, because it's a very good point, y'all. Because like you said, it's just not a lot of depth there. Just frank, just kind of looking at what we had last year, what we're bringing back this year. It's just not a lot of guys, right? Like we said, we know Caden McDonald. Some of the things he did in short yardage was very impressive. So we kind of you expect that he probably could hold the ship at the nose tackle position and do some good things and make some winning. But then you start looking at Edric Houston, who's a second-year player. Yeah, he started playing some D tackle late last season. But when it comes down to it, he hasn't been in there very long, very often. And he'll be more, I guess, in that 3-tech type of role for Ohio State. And to be honest, it's just different, right? If you tell me a guy's an end, he goes into the tackle, and now he has to worry about the double team that he has to face from the guard and send the guard and tackle on some of those running downs early down. Like, it's much different. And obviously Houston's a talented guy. But we had to just kind of see how he sits in there and how he's able to play those things. Obviously, Coach Johnson will be working on it and getting ready for that. Behind them, you got Tywone Malone, hasn't played much. You got Will Smith Jr., hasn't played pretty much at all. And then you just got younger guys from there. So you just start looking at the sheer depth of the interior of our defensive line. It's just not a lot of known guys, not a lot of bodies there. So this would be a big camp for them to kind of show what they could do, because there's definitely an opportunity for some guys to emerge and really earn their stripes here in this camp for sure.
Yeah, if you look at that on defense, staying on defense, that second safety position, you lose Lathan Ransom to the NFL. You got a guy in Malik Harford that's, he's played a decent amount of ball for Ohio State as a freshman, and then some last year as well. Jalen McClain going into year 2, he looked like a guy that was ready to play last year as a freshman. So I'm excited to see how that competition kind of develops in camp, who emerges as the main guy out of the two. Or, do you play both of them? Does a guy like Caleb Downs slide into maybe a nickel position in certain situations? Obviously, you got Lorenzo Styles as well that plays the nickel. So they got some guys with some experience, but that second safety position is going to be crucial, given that was a position that we got a lot of production from.
A lot of production. Right.
A lot of production. So that's going to be interesting. I like the corners overall. I think there's a lot of depth at corner. Even the young corners seem to be pretty good depth. You got it. I just mentioned it to you earlier, but Devin Sanchez, I saw him last week for the first time in person, just like next to him.
Okay, what do you look like?
Yeah, he make me look like a kid, man. I look like a little boy. I like, man, he's tall. He's definitely put on some muscle, put on some weight, and just watch him. He's very fluid, right? So at that size, at that height, to have that level of fluidity, to be able to move like that, that's hard to do for most guys, right? It don't look that hard for him, and he's just a freshman. So it's gonna be. I'm excited to see how he develops as well, and how much, they put on him early on. He's a guy that looks like he has the ability to have a lot of versatility, but I suspect that he focuses on the cornerback position, and I'm interested to see how much they put on him, and how much playing time they get, and how soon, right? So that's gonna be interesting as well.
Yeah. So like you said, we got camp kicking off here on the 31st here. It looks like it's open to the fans. The first practice 2 and 3 is open to the fans. So there's going to be a lot of social media posts, as we know. We'll see we can kind of gather what we can see in articles, and obviously we'll be reporting back on that, as we kind of get our camp rolling here for our 25 season. But I want to bring this up, man. Cignetti, Kirk Cignetti, he's the Indiana Hoosiers coach. Fantastic first year, but he is known for the sound bites, man. He's known for, making some headlines and saying some stuff. And, usually it's pretty in a jokingly fashion, but it's good stuff, nonetheless. It's stuff that he kind of says. But they've been actually doing some things at the university. Over the past couple of weeks, they had canceled the home and home series they had with Virginia. And at the Big Ten media, Coach Cignetti was kind of asked about that. And he kind of bring up the point like, hey, we're playing the SEC schedule. And when he says that, meaning like the Big Ten Conference we could argue it's the top conference here in college football. We play 9 games in conference. They only play 8. I'm not about to make myself a extra headache here trying to prepare for a team where I already got enough in my conference to try to get the things I need, which is get into the playoffs. What's your thoughts on that? Is it the right approach? Obviously, Ohio State not taking that approach right now. What's your thoughts on that? And Coach Cignetti kind of saying like, hey, we're going to play that under radar and try to sneak into the playoffs every year over the next year, in the future.
Yeah, so to me, Kirk Cignetti is the Deion Sanders of the Midwest. All right, he doesn't have the playing career. He doesn't have the swag of a Deion, right? Similar to Deion, he came from a D1 AA level of school, came up to Indiana, brought a ton of guys with him that could play at that level, that he believed could play at that level, brought a ton of guys in from the transfer portal, and he made some noise, made it to the playoffs. Indiana was predicted to be last or second to last, bottom third in the conference.
Bottom tier, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and They ended up being a top 4 team. And I like, similar to Deion, he says what he's thinking in these press conferences. And I like it because I think in today's college football, if you're a team like Colorado, if you're a team like Indiana, nobody's paying attention to you unless the coach brings that attention. And the Kirk Cincinnati is bringing that attention. And it only works if you win it. Right? In other words, you look like a fool if you're losing, right? But if you're winning, it works. And what Kurt is basically saying, we're going to keep trying to win. And the way we're going to do that is we're not going to schedule tough out of conference games. And I know fans don't like it. I know the thought process, and I understand it, right? You should go out there and play the best. All right. If you're the best, you should play the best. Listen, it's a long season. And there's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten. When the Big Ten merges with the Pac-12, basically some of the top teams, Oregon, USC, it's no longer the Big Ten of the past. So there's a lot of teams there. So if you have 9 conference games, you're playing a decent schedule.
You're going to play some good teams.
And he basically said, I'm scheduling like the SEC. And I saw a lot of noise from SEC people and even people outside the SEC that said, the SEC this year are playing tough games. Texas is playing Ohio State. Alabama, I think maybe Wisconsin or somebody else. I don't know exactly who they're playing. But I also did some of my own research. And if you look across the SEC, and while they may not all be scheduling FCS teams, Georgia plays Austin Peay, Marshall, and Charlotte. They play Marshall, sure, but they only play 8 conference games. Those are teams that they're likely to beat by a lot, right? LSU, Louisiana Tech, Southern Louisiana, Western Kentucky, Auburn, Ball State, South Alabama, and Mercer, Oklahoma, Illinois State, Temple. You go down the list. It's like 10 teams where their out of conference schedule isn't. It's a joke.
It's nothing. Right? It's nothing. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they lean on the fact that they play each other, and they're playing a high strength of schedule because all of us are tough in the SEC. But they only play 8 of those games, and at the end of the day, we don't truly know, if you're not playing other conferences and other tough teams, how good you really are. You're just playing each other. So I like Kurt's point. And at the end of the day, if they play well in the Big Ten, they should get an opportunity to play for the playoffs. And it's as simple as that. And then, you prove yourself at that point. And I also believe this, that regular season within your conference, what you do then determines whether or not you should represent your conference. It's not like, you can't say, oh, all 7 of us have a tough conference. We all have tough games. So that's why. Okay, well, that's fine. But you've already proven you're not one of the best in your conference. So we don't need to see it again. We don't need to see y'all play each other again in the playoffs. You already played each other in the regular season. So I like his approach. I think I prefer Ohio State to adopt some of that approach. But I know most people don't agree with that. So I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with Ohio State playing the tough out of conference games. It's usually one a season, right? And I know we already kind of got some stuff lined up here in the future. I think Alabama's on there, and somebody in the, I don't know, somebody else, Big 12, I think maybe ACC. I don't know, somebody else is on there. I'm fine with it because to me it's Ohio State. Like we want to be top tier. So even if we have that big out of the conference game and we don't play well, so early in the season we lose, we know we have the opportunity to play ourselves back to where we want to throughout the Big Ten. Let's put that pressure on ourselves. Let's keep college football going. Maybe Ohio State has to carry the fire of college football, and I'm fine with that because I don't know. To me, it's important. It's fun to see. Another thing Cincinnati was big on was the automatic qualifiers for the conference. It's been kind of thrown out there. The Big Ten and the SEC, we get 4 teams automatically in, and that's another thing. Obviously, that plays huge in his favor, right? Because now he could be 3, he could be 4. And if he's not, if he doesn't beat the top tier teams in the conference, then he still get his teams in the playoffs.
But his point is that maybe those top 2 teams go to the playoffs, but for those other spots, you have to play yourself in to be qualified to represent the Big Ten in the playoffs, which means, you are proving that we are one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten. So we now get an opportunity to go to the playoffs. So like in the SEC, if you're 5th or 6th in the SEC, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it anymore. You had an opportunity to play against your group and determine who are our top 4 teams. You guys move on to the playoffs, and now we go play a playoffs and see who's the best in the country. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the automatic qualifier myself, like the teams getting the 4, but I do understand the logic around, these are 2 super conferences basically, and the teams that play themselves in, and we determine these are the best teams, the 4 best teams in these conferences, now move on. And then for the rest of the college football, we identify who the rest of those teams are.
And he also kind of gave a little bit of purpose back to that championship weekend after the season. He kind of had a little play-in tournament to get to the actual playoffs. And that makes a little bit more sense than this extra game to be the Big Ten or SEC champion. I don't know. But, man, just real quick, before we jump off here, I wanted to just hit, there was an executive order signed regarding college athletes and their compensation. The executive order, I didn't read the order, right? But just for what I gathered from reading articles on it, it's basically just kind of saying that third-party payments for players have to kind of go through some type of system to determine that it's a fair market value, which kind of gives a little bit of law to the previous ruling that the NCAA put in place regarding that third-party reviewing deal. So you're kind of getting away from that kind of that pay-to-play type of situation. Don't know if any of it's going to hold, but it's at least there's something out there now that kind of backs up the ruling, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be
I don't know, man.
Uncertainty, but that's honestly. I think it's just going to be more uncertainty at this point, bro. Oh, no. I got one more thing on that playoff. I got one more thing on the playoffs. I want an NIT. I want basically like, all right, we have to play. Guys go on for the playoffs. Instead of bowl season, I want a very intentional Big Ten versus SEC, who's the king of college football type matchup, so that we can go into next year with real favorites of each of these games and a real perspective on who has the toughest strength of schedule. Instead of just assuming that these SEC teams that, paid a lot of money to some of these players and guys got transferred in, we just assume that, those high recruiting classes are going to pan out. At Texas A&M, we can see that they don't always pan out, right? But yeah, I want an NIT type format and put some money behind it. Right? The Big Ten versus SEC, whoever wins gets a pot of money. So
yeah, so once Maryland go out there and blow out Vanderbilt, then we know what it is, right? We know what it is from there, man. But no, that's our show.
Exactly.
Obviously, we're gonna keep bringing you guys the highlights, the what we gather from our camp, who's emerging, who is going to be our quarterback to kind of take that first snap against Texas here in about a month. So we got a lot to go kind of sort through and get through. But as always, we'll bring it to you. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We'll be bringing it to you guys as we kind of get it. We end our show always with a nice OH.
Yo.
Go Bucks. Talk to you guys soon.
Bucks.